Thanks everyone for joining us for another episode on the Travel Collective where I share exciting journeys. And I'm just going to jump right into it and welcome Elaine Dixon. Thanks for joining me. And
Thank
I'm
you.
excited to hear about Morocco as always. So today we're going to talk about a literary tour to Morocco. So welcome, Elaine.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about this wonderful trip. I'm so excited to talk about this one. I know some of your viewers will have seen me before talking about various tours in Morocco, but this one is brand new that we're starting this fall. It's called Storied Morocco, and it is a literary journey. So, the idea behind this one is to kind of recognize um, I guess the impact that Morocco has had on various Western and Moroccan writers, of course, but there's actually quite a story behind the number of Western writers who have gone to Morocco, sometimes purposefully to write, sometimes serendipitously, like they've gone, let's say, for a vacation or at various periods of times, like post-war, World War II, for example, they went there for various reasons of escape or refuge or sanctuary. Um, and they ended up writing some of their signature works there. They found themselves transfixed, for lack of a better word, by Morocco and by the life and lifestyle. Some of them did, of course, leave and they went on their merry way, went home, whatever. But there's quite a number who actually stayed, and some stayed for many years and basically made Morocco their second home. So this tour is kind of, um, I guess, raising awareness about those writers and their works and the important role that Morocco has played in their literary careers. So that having been said, this is not an academic tour. This really is a lovely sightseeing tour with lots of different, I guess, features and activities focused around this literary aspect to Morocco. So some of the practical details here before we start waxing eloquently about the activities. Um, we have this scheduled for 11 days and 10 nights this fall. We actually have one tour that's already full, so we're running a second one. The dates for this tour are November 21st to December 1st, and the price in US dollars is 3,340. So that does include all taxes and fees, of course. There's no single supplement. And the other thing that's exciting about this tour is that if you have maybe 5 extra days, we can tack on a 5 day, 4 night excursion to the desert. So you can add the Sahara Desert to this trip for an additional US 1,040. So this is just a magical trip. It really does touch on some beautiful cities and highlights that you'd expect to find whenever you go to Morocco. Um, I should mention, I guess, just further details about the price. This is a land-only price, so it's ground transportation in a private 8 passenger vehicle with a private English-speaking Moroccan host and driver. Plus, you get me along with you because I will be escorting this tour. I have been to Morocco many, many times, and so I am just looking forward to the pleasure of leading this particular trip. Um, some of the other practical details, everyone on this trip gets a private room with a private bathroom. We are staying in traditional Moroccan riads, which are small, like guest houses. They are the old family mansions in the Medinas that have been refurbished, renovated to make little guest houses. They're very intimate. Most of them don't have more than 7 or 8 rooms. And they just feel like miniature palaces. And you get a private room in these lovely little spots. Many of them have pools. Some of them have terraces, rooftop terraces. So they're very unique. And the experience is very, very special to stay in these places. The food is always wonderful in Morocco. So again, there will be the opportunities to try some of the signature dishes of Morocco and experience the lovely cuisine. Because we're going in November, it's kind of harvest time in the fall. And so there are lots of harvest festivals and activities. This particular tour may still be in time for part of the saffron harvest, excuse
Oh,
me.
wow.
So there's the possibility of at least witnessing some of that or participating in it. This is a wonderful tour because the route basically takes you from your departure point, which is Casablanca. We'll go up the Atlantic coast to Tangier. We'll spend a couple of days there because, again, many writers spent considerable time in Tangier. We will make a stop on the way to Fez at the blue village of Chefchaouen. So that's always a highlight on people's bucket list when they're thinking of a tour to Morocco. And we'll also spend a couple of days in Fez. So in Fez, I'm actually hoping that we will have a literary evening where we can invite some local writers or poets in to share dinner with us and perhaps share some of their works and things like that, and just have a discussion about all things literary. We then continue on to Marrakesh, and again, stays in lovely hotels, some wonderful sightseeing there, some potential literary highlights as well. So we'll just see what happens. But in all of these cities, you can count on visiting the houses or the hotels or some bookstores or bars or other hangouts where these writers were creating their wonderful works. Um, I guess I should probably just mention some of the writers that I'm talking about
Yes.
here. So some of the names that people might recognize would be Paul Bowles, who actually did basically spend a significant number of years in Morocco. Agatha Christie. Um, how about Hugh Laurie or Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe? Um, just picking up a few others here. Jean Genet, some people would recognize his name, although not so much a writer, but certainly his films were influenced in Morocco. Jack Kerouac, Hans Christian Andersen, lots and lots of these people, Mark Twain, are all really literary giants in their own way and have written some really significant pieces while being in Morocco. So, in preparation for this tour, we actually have put together a little bit of a reading list. And again, this isn't meant to be homework or anything like that, but it does mean that you'll have the chance to kind of maybe refresh your memory of reading some of these works, or perhaps dive into some new ones that you hadn't been aware of before, and get a bit of a sense for yourself of the kind of work that people did when they were actually traveling in Morocco. And of course, the other bonus for us here is how could we not give you a personal journal as part of this tour so that you can keep your own notes and you can perhaps start your own great novel? So our intention is to really make this fun and interesting and just lovely in every possible way.
I think it sounds super inspiring. I mean, just like when you mentioned Mark Twain and some of the other writers that we're aware of, how they were so moved by the experiences they had and how unique Morocco is. So that in itself is just exciting in the cities that you've mentioned that we'll be visiting.
Yes, and we're going to do walking tours in all of these cities. There will actually be 5 guided walking tours on this trip. And so you'll actually get, on the ground experience of the cities and these landmarks and the significant places where these people basically lived. The restaurants where they went to, the street life that they would have seen and been part of. All of that is still very real and pretty authentic to what it would have been like for some of these writers. We're also including contemporary writers too. So um, some people might be familiar with the work of Leilani, for example, or Christine Magnan. Those are a couple of contemporary people whose works are also focused around Morocco. So this isn't a historical tour in that respect. It's really about the lively life uh, in the literary arts that you can find in Morocco.
So tell us a little bit about what people can expect weather-wise, because we all know Morocco, in our minds, I think, for, at least from those of us stateside in the United States that might be listening, We think of Morocco as oh my gosh, it might be super hot, and you've got the Sahara Desert. But you also mentioned going up along the coast. So tell us a little bit about the weather as best as you can for November, that time of year.
Sure. So when we talk to people about the best times to visit Morocco, we talk about the shoulder seasons of both spring and fall. So typically we encourage people to go, let's say March to May in the spring, and then again September to the end of November in the fall. And when you're closer to summer, so if you're talking about May or September, it's still going to be really hot. But if you're there in March or November, it's really wonderful weather because it's a perfect temperature still for sitting outside, eating outside, taking walks, doing these Medina walks that can be, several hours in length. You're not going to be sweating bullets because of the weather. So the only downside is that when you're going in March or November, and November is when this one is running, probably it's too late for pools,
Mm.
outdoor pools, because the pools are not heated.
Right.
So you may find it a bit too cool for that. It will be cooler in the evenings. So again, lovely daytime temperatures for walking. But in the evenings, you might need a sweater or a light jacket. And particularly if you do participate in the desert extension, it can be quite chilly in the desert at night. So of course you're in a cozy tent and there's great big blankets and everything, so you won't be uncomfortable, but you can prepare yourself by basically taking two season wear. Summer and light fall jackets or sweaters will be perfect.
Wonderful. And then the food, which sounds amazing in Morocco, um, are there things that people should think about if they have any type of dietary restrictions or, concerns about that, how that might be handled or?
Mhm. Um, Morocco grows everything. So you'll find everything from soft fruits and apples to pineapples, coconuts, and bananas. They just grow everything. All the vegetables that you are comfortable with now, you're going to find in Morocco, and they'll be fresh and locally grown. And because it's a small country, then everything is fresh and, picked when it's ripe, ready to eat, because it doesn't have to travel far to market. Um, I've talked about the vegetables. Of course, every kind of meat is available except pork because it is a Muslim country. But you'll never find anything on your plate that is surprising or different. What's different about Moroccan cuisine, perhaps, is the way in which they use spices. So
Mm.
sometimes when you say the food is spicy, people think hot, but that's not typically Moroccan. So what they do is they use the aromatic spices and sweet spices like cinnamon and cloves and ginger and saffron, things like that, cardamom. They combine those with savories, so with the meats and with the vegetables and things like that. So you just get endless deliciousness. Now,
Yeah.
if you do have dietary restrictions, as you're asking, um, it's a haven for people who are vegetarians. There is just endless variety to the vegetables that are available. Lots of different salads are available, both cooked and raw. And so it's very easy to have a very nice, meal, dinner or lunch, if you're vegetarian. If you have restrictions, like if you are gluten intolerant, we need to know about that so that we can call ahead to the restaurants and the riads and make sure that they're prepared for that. But we can manage things like that. Similarly, with allergies, we need to know if people have tree nut allergies.
Oh.
So they don't grow peanuts in Morocco, but there are things like almonds, walnuts. Those are the two that just come to mind, hazelnuts to some degree. Those are the ones that come to mind and which are used frequently in the same meat dishes. So
Mm.
if you've got a meat tagine, and a tagine is like a casserole, if you've got a beef casserole, it might well have prunes and dates and almonds in it. Or instead of almonds, maybe walnuts. So again, if you have those allergies, then we need to know just to make sure that the chef doesn't put those into your meal.
Great. Yeah, that sounds good. And then I love the sound of the riads. And you talk, so as far as breakfast, do they include that when you're staying in these types of places or?
Mhm. Yes, that's a great question. So Morocco takes its lead on hospitality from European standards in lots of ways. So breakfast is always included at your riad in the morning. And it's typically a Moroccan breakfast, so you're not going to find bacon and eggs, but you will occasionally find eggs. Otherwise, it's Moroccan pastries, things often similar to oh, maybe similar to pancakes, toast, yogurt, fruit, um, always freshly squeezed orange juice, which is just one of the wonderful things about breakfast in Morocco.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, cheese, those kinds of things are pretty typically available for breakfast.
Yeah. It sounds wonderful. And you said the dates again were November 21st, I believe, through.
To December 1st. And if you add the desert extension, then your trip will go to December 6th.
Wonderful. So, yeah, that gives people, the dates. And if they want more information, contact you at cometothesahara.com, which Elaine has right on her screen right there.
Did I just zip past it? There it is. Yes.
Yes. It sounds amazing. It sounds wonderful. And I love the idea of including the influences of the writers. And I think we should re-emphasize it's not, you don't have to be a scholar. You don't have to feel like it's a study trip in any way, shape, or form. It's more just highlighting that aspect of it.
That's right. Yes. Yes. As I say, we don't want anyone to think that there's homework and there won't be a test or anything. But if you have read some of these books, so I'm thinking of Tangier, for example. If you have read some of the books of Paul Bowles, for example, then your experience in Tangier is just going to be that much richer because you're going to look differently at the streets and the buildings around you and the cafes where he would have, hung out with friends and other writers. And some of these writers knew each other, right?
Oh,
So
yes.
like Paul Bowles and Jack Kerouac and William S. Burroughs, they were all there at pretty much the same time. Edith Wharton is another one. And so again, when you're visiting these places, um, you can just imagine yourself sitting there with them, writing some of the books that you will have read.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you.
So I'm going to talk briefly about New England. It's a place like Elaine loves Morocco. I tend to love New England. I've been many times. I think autumn is just a fabulous time to experience it. And this year, I kind of taking the lead a little bit from Elaine and some of my current workings here in Vegas with local authors. Just that whole literary aspect. As a child, many of us knew Robert Frost and his poems. I mean, he lived in several places in New England. You can still visit his home. And kind of like Elena's, painting the picture of Morocco, it's kind of similar with New England. When you think about it, the farm we visit in, New Hampshire, where Robert Frost lived and did his chores and did his writing, those trees are actually the same trees he would have walked past. Those leaves falling, each season, that's what he would experience. The path we walk, they've literally laid out kind of the path that he would take each morning or in the evening. And so you can just kind of put yourself back in that space and experience the smells and just the feelings of New England. And if you've always lived in Los Angeles or a big metro city in the United States, visiting these small towns at this time of year is just, it's almost like stepping back in time. You almost can't believe it exists. Oftentimes I get a comment when we're passing through a small town is like, wait, that's all there was? A post office and a church? And it's like, yeah, these communities still exist and people still have a little bit slower way of life. So it's a lovely time to go to New England. I'm hoping to go this year, the second week of October, essentially, October 11 through 18, which generally is at the height of the colors. Again, with Mother Nature, we can't promise all things perfect, but we have the widest swath of what traditionally is the colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows, and just that season. Along with that, though, we also often get a taste of rain and maybe some misty mornings, but if you're into being creative and you like to take pictures, that rain and that moisture often just pops the colors that much more. Or, you can be sitting with your warm coffee at sunrise on a pad, on a, porch, an old-fashioned farmhouse porch, and look out over the ridge and maybe hear the chickens or the cows, or just observe the clouds and the morning and have those moments to be writing your own, great experience, or, reading those Robert Frost poems and putting yourself in that space. Generally, we start the trip and end the trip in Manchester, New Hampshire. There is easily transportation from Boston, which is the larger airport, but Manchester is just an easier place to collect everyone. It has great shuttle service, and if I don't personally meet you at the airport, I always make sure you have transportation. From there, we generally head up the southern Maine coast and spend an evening not far from one of my favorite lighthouses, and the boats and the lobsters. And Maine is just a little bit quieter in October. It hasn't been quite as discovered as such for fall foliage as the more popular New Hampshire and Vermont. But to me, it's a lovely time. It's a little quieter. You really get to smell the sea and see the ocean, and witness these places that have inspired many writers. We may take a side trip up to Kennebunkport, which has been, well, the Bushes and the political family history of that stretches back generations, spent their time there, and honestly, others as well. They have a very active arts community along the coast there. We may stop at some galleries, and there's plenty of little used bookshops. I always marvel at the drive north from Manchester, New Hampshire, up along the coast, the number of used bookstores that have old volumes, sometimes dating back to the 1790s. I actually came across a full set of encyclopedias that were printed in 1790. And if you think about that in terms of American history, George Washington hadn't been, was just past his presidency and the infancy of the United States and all the history that had yet to happen. So it's pretty amazing, and touching the paper. So we may try to make time to stop at one of these places, and so you can see some of these old volumes yourself. And then we'll head into New Hampshire. I always like to spend time around Lake Winnipesaukee. For me, it kind of takes me back to movies like On Golden Pond, uh, just a famous film, which was also inspired by a book. The summer camps, which many of us kids, I think there was that twin movie, and I'll have to get the name and reference it, that was kind of based on sending kids off to these summer camps, and they're all along the shores of the lake. And again, in fall, it's kind of fun to stay in a little cabin, and step outside and see the loons and hear the sound of them and observe the change of seasons. And then we'll head up into Vermont. There's many places in Vermont, again, where Robert Frost and many other writers, there's contemporary writers. I may mispronounce her name, Jodi Picoult, and some others that are contemporary novelists that base their writings on New England. So we also do all the foodie things. Like Elaine, I love the foods of New England. They're kind of, special to that area of the country. The maple syrups, the smoked cheeses of Vermont, apple orchards. I mean, it's the time of year where there's plenty of apple stands, and the different varietals of apples is amazing to me. These growers and farmers are very interested in what they can create and bringing back old apples that were planted, when George Washington was around and others. So you get a real mix of history, currently what's happening. I mean, that whole idea that we're hearing about a farm to table, I mean, that's just been their way of life this entire time. So, and kind of like Morocco, the food is fresh. I mean, they're picking it that, you can have an apple that was picked just like an hour, or you pick it yourself off the tree. Fresh hot cider donuts, the cheese, and meet the ladies that have been working in the same little farmhouse and wrapping the cheese and dipping it in the wax and the foil to make it last longer, things like that. So the food is really amazing. The days are shorter. It does get dark in October about 6 o'clock. So when I talk about sunrise, you may think, ah, I'm not getting up for sunrise. But if you're a photographer, you may want to get out there with me and see what your camera can take in. But maybe by the end of the week, you'll be curious about the daylight and the colors at that hour of the morning because 6 o'clock comes quick, and then we're tucking in for dinner, and we always stay in locally owned bed and breakfasts, cabins I mentioned. I usually try to make a variety of locations based on somewhere scenic. So honestly, if you don't want to get up at sunrise and you get up a little bit later, just right out your front door might be the lake, might be the ocean, a farm scene with rolling hills and cows, the trees. So lots of things just right outside your door. And that's only possible in these smaller places that may only have 6 or 8 rooms. Um, some of the bed and breakfasts no longer offer a home cooked breakfast, so then we might venture out to get that. But there are a few places where they are still preparing a fresh breakfast with, where they can point out we got the sausage down the road from Mr. Jones, and the honey came from our beehive out back, and the maple syrup was collected from the row of trees in the driveway. So just a really special time of year. The price I'm doing it at this year, it's $7,000 per couple. So if you have a bestie and want to share the room, we can count that as a couple. Or it's $3,500 per person, and that includes your lodging, my guiding services, any special tours, all your breakfasts. Does not include airfare. I really feel like everyone has so many different airlines they like to use now that we let you book that on your own. If you want to tack on days at the beginning or end in Boston, I have some wonderful people, a Boston history guide I can recommend for you who can personally take you around or give you some pointers on how to enjoy Boston. So that's what I have. So we've got these wonderful 2 tours, both with a little bit of literary influence. So if that's your jam, we hope you'll reach out to Elaine at cometothesahara.com. It'll be in the show notes as well. And you can find me at yourphototravelguide.com or fallphototrips.com. And of course, the Travel Collective, Elaine and I are both listed there as well. So hope to see you all soon and check in with us for another episode. Thanks.